So, Andrade, former WWE Superstar, continues to make headlines even after his WWE release last week because early yesterday, former WWE star Andrade, real name Manuel Alfonso Andrade Oropeza, did an interview with Hugo Savinovich of Lucha Libre Online's Facebook page. Now, Andrade, of course, was released by WWE last week and reportedly does not have a 90-day non-compete clause, so he could be appearing in any promotion in the coming weeks or months. The interview was in Spanish, and numerous translations of certain headlines began making the rounds of what Andrade had to say on a variety of WWE topics. Now, one such topic which certainly grabbed quite a few headlines and certainly had a lot of people talking was about a WWE doctor telling his fiancée, Charlotte Flair, that she was pregnant, which is why her storyline leading up to WrestleMania 37 was pulled, and Charlotte was reportedly pulled from the show. Now, of course, Charlotte ended up taking her own pregnancy tests at home, and they all came back negative. Now, obviously, when this story first broke last night, a lot of people were talking about it because it really seemed, I don't want to say negligent from WWE's point of view, but it certainly seemed surprising that WWE, a publicly traded company, a billion-dollar company, with a vast medical team and medical experts, could get something so major like this wrong as misdiagnosing a pregnancy or saying someone was pregnant when they weren't and pulling them from a major show. I mean, not just a major show, the biggest show of the year, WrestleMania 37. Especially when live fans in attendance, especially a big star like Charlotte Flair, who has main evented WrestleMania, it was a big story. And especially once you start talking about Andrade, his release, sort of the conspiracy theorist would certainly have a field day, and did have a field day talking about this. So Charlotte Flair's team has since put out a statement addressing this story, giving more context to the story as they felt some details were lost in the translation from an interview. This is what Charlotte Flair's team had to say, quote, "What Manny said about the pregnancy test in today's interview is true, but a significant amount of context is lost in translation, and we'd like to clear that up as best as we can. A few weeks ago, Charlotte received a call from WWE Medical telling her that her HCG levels had come back high and she was medically suspended for pregnancy. That day, she took several home tests and they all came back negative. A few days later, blood work and an ultrasound confirmed there was no pregnancy. This was before any issues with COVID. She is currently medically clear. This puts a lot of context for her, mainly how small a woman's career window is. The men are able to work well into their 50s, while the women are seen as, quote, older, early in their 30s even. For an athlete in her prime, these years mean everything. Her issue was with the process and how the information was relayed as opposed to the information itself." Now, as previously noted in that statement, and as we've reported here on the channel as well, Charlotte Flair confirmed a couple of weeks ago, was it last week, that she tested positive for COVID-19, but as mentioned in the above statement, she is now medically cleared to return and could be returning to WWE television sooner rather than later. Of course, there's been lots of discussions about her possibly being added to the Raw Women's Championship match at WrestleMania, possibly being added to the SmackDown Women's Championship match at WrestleMania. This interview by Andrade, and ironically, you know, this interview was actually happening quite late over here in the United Kingdom. It was around sort of midnight, 1 a.m. last night, which was around the time of Monday Night Raw. Now, obviously, when they do these kind of interviews, when they do them at the same time as Monday Night Raw, just before or just after Monday Night Raw, there's a reason there, obviously, being that most people at that period of time are on social media talking about pro wrestling or interested in pro wrestling, or just more people, wrestling fans, which is the target audience for an interview like that, are on social media at that time, so it makes sense to do the interview at that time. Now, obviously, Andrade is a hot topic at the moment because he has just been released. He wasn't being used by WWE. His release from the company was very public. He had requested his release. It was denied, and then eventually, randomly, it feels like, it was accepted. Now, during the interview, there had been discussions about he had tested positive for COVID himself, and WWE didn't want to release him whilst he was still isolating, and then once he was found to be clear and medically cleared, then they did release him. I don't know about that. I'm sure more information will come out about all of that, and I know Andrade has just done an interview himself, but I do think when it comes to this Charlotte Flair pregnancy story and her being pulled from WrestleMania and it being a false diagnosis, etc., I do agree with the statement that was released in the sense that You know, it is true that sometimes, and especially probably in this case, when an interview is being conducted in one language and then is being translated into another one, there is a lot of context that can be lost. And whilst translations do exist, a lot of the times, and we've had this issue over here in the United Kingdom with certain sports stars, major sports stars, that when someone says something in one language and it's translated into another, sometimes the translation doesn't always translate perfectly into English, or sometimes the context of what one word means in one language is different to the context of what it actually means in English. Sometimes there is no English equivalent for the word, and as I mentioned, sometimes the context can be a bit lost. So I do agree with that there. I don't know if I fully agree with the whole context was completely lost. I did think when I was seeing this whole thing happen last night, this interview with Andrade, the thing that kept pinging in my head at the time was this does put Charlotte Flair in a very difficult position. And I think the whole time that Andrade was going through this issue with WWE and not being used, his frustration and eventually requesting his release, it being denied and then eventually being released, I think Charlotte Flair was obviously in a very difficult position. I mean, she's a top star in WWE. She's one of the biggest stars in WWE, certainly in the women's division. She has main evented WrestleMania. She is going to probably break her own father's record for world championships. She is the daughter of Ric Flair. I know people don't like to refer to her like that and go, "Sure, she's well more than that. She's Charlotte Flair." Of course she is, but you obviously have to embrace her heritage as well. And she's very well known. She's a big star, and this whole situation, this whole scenario has put her in a difficult position because WWE, whilst they're going through the stuff of Andrade, they don't want to upset one of their top talents. They certainly don't want to lose one of their top talents, and I'm sure Charlotte Flair doesn't want to leave WWE. She's happy there. She's happy with the money she's making. She's happy with the spot she's in, and it's WrestleMania season. She wants to be involved in that. There's lots of different parts there, so I do sympathise with Charlotte Flair, and a little bit I do sympathise with WWE because it's a difficult position as well. It's very political and it's very difficult. And when I was hearing this interview, when I was reading this interview, and certainly the translated statements, because I didn't speak Spanish, when I was reading this last night, the thing I was thinking was this does put Charlotte Flair in a difficult position. I wonder if it would get any heat on her in terms of WWE. I don't necessarily think it will. I just can't see a scenario where WWE punishes or badly books Charlotte Flair because they've never done it. And frankly, I think they would be too terrified to lose her. Because she is part of a wrestling dynasty. She is a Flair. She is a fantastic performer. She is very good at what she does, and there's a lot of equity in that Charlotte Flair brand that I don't think WWE would want to lose. So I don't think WWE would want to get rid of her. So I don't think WWE would really have people upset or have heat on her or book her badly or anything like that. I just can't see that. But I'm sure there would be some higher ups, some officials, or some people that might be upset about someone, being her fiance, saying not necessarily bad things about WWE. If you read the interview, I don't think Andrade goes out of his way to openly bash WWE. I think he just chows what he perceives as his version of the truth. And this story about Charlotte Flair, about the pregnancy misdiagnosis, I don't think he openly bashes WWE. I just think people will read it, and like my initial reaction was, and I think a lot of people's initial reaction would be that, how does that happen? How does that happen? Again, you're a publicly traded company. You're a billion-dollar company. You've got this vast medical team, your own medical wellness policy and everything. And how does something as fundamental like that happen when Charlotte Flair does her own tests at home? Andrade says they went to the pharmacy themselves and every test was negative. How does that happen? I understand that sometimes it's a rare occasion, but sometimes in life people think that they're pregnant and they're not, or they get a test result back that says they're pregnant and then they take another one and they're negative. I understand that, but I don't know. It just seems very odd, especially considering the timing of it all. I think is also important there. I think the timing of it all with Andrade's release and it being WrestleMania season, that does seem questionable. And as I mentioned, people might look more into that than there is there. But certainly, if there was a conspiracy there, it's obvious to see where people can jump to make those conclusions there, I think, with that one. And as I mentioned, it's WrestleMania season. It just seems odd. It just seems very, very odd. And as I mentioned, that WWE are saying that our HCG levels are high. and that she was medically suspended for pregnancy. I think that might be just a normal thing. You know, I don't know if that's happened to other female WWE superstars over time. I don't know. But those tests, I think that's probably protocol for any female sports athlete in the world. I don't think there's any question about that. I think the thing that people are questioning about that is, okay, if say Charlotte Flair, her levels were high, and they said, right, for the time being, you might be pregnant. We don't know. That is, it looks like you're pregnant. I'm just surprised that they would go, right, we're going to pull you from everything straight away. I wouldn't, not to say that Charlotte Flair would be working matches. Of course she shouldn't. If she was pregnant, why on earth would you have her in the ring? But until you had that confirmation, surely you would keep her factored in. That would be the thing I would think there. Surely that would be the thing. Surely you would be, okay, the levels are high. You're not going to work any matches, but let's do some more tests. Do your own test. We'll send you for an ultrasound, etc., etc. Let's figure this out. The idea of your levels are high, we're pulling you from everything, you're not even factored in the plan, Rhea Ripley's going to be facing Asuka, that just seems odd. That does seem odd. Considering that WWE surely would want to have a concrete, confirmed answer before they pull her from the biggest show of the year. That to me seems odd. And maybe I am looking more into, maybe I am looking more into it. I don't know. Considering the time that it's WrestleMania, considering that her fiance is going through this stuff with WWE and he wants his own release, it does seem odd, and I don't know if there's anything there. It might just be honest mistakes. But again, if it's honest mistakes, you then have to question the medical department by saying, I understand there are protocols in place, and this might be a case of protocols being in place but having wrong information. I don't know. It just seems very confusing. And the fact that, I'm talking about it now and I'm confusing myself, I can't imagine how confusing it is for Andrade and it is for Charlotte Flair, and it does seem odd. It does seem odd, and I would hate to see. I know people aren't necessarily fans of Charlotte Flair, or they're not fans of Charlotte Flair being put in these big positions, especially come WrestleMania. She's never not competed for a world championship or a women's championship at WrestleMania. It's unbelievable. But again, I've always been, first to say that I don't think that's Charlotte Flair's fault. And what's she supposed to say? Oh no, don't put me in a title match. That's whoever books her in those positions. They're the one that should really have the heat there, not Charlotte Flair. She just does her job. So I don't know. I don't know. It does seem very, very strange. I'm not surprised she's released a statement. I don't necessarily think that is as much from Charlotte Flair as more from WWE, to be honest, because again, I think WWE looks bad in this. I don't think that was Andrade's intention. I don't think Andrade made or wanted WWE to look bad by any stretch of the imagination or anything like that. I think he was just telling the truth. I think he was asked a question and he was told his story. The issue is that the story doesn't make WWE look good. So I think probably, they probably had conversation with Charlotte Flair and said, can you release this statement? Can you say it's from your team? Can you say it's from you? Because it doesn't look good from a medical testing point of view. And look, there have been stones thrown at WWE's medical policy in the past, whether it's CM Punk. Of course, he was involved in litigation because he said the WWE medical team, a specific doctor, wasn't good at what they did and misdiagnosed a MRSA infection. And now to misdiagnose a pregnancy, again, I know that's probably more common, but still, you would think that a company of the size of WWE and a medical department the size of WWE, they would get these things right and not be so rash in the decisions they make because of this pregnancy diagnosis. Especially when, look, this wasn't like confirmation. According to the statement, the levels were high, and they said, well, that could mean you're pregnant. To pull her from everything without actually being properly confirmed, it just seems strange. It does seem very strange. So I'm sure more will come of this. Obviously, people are going to be interested to see what happens with Charlotte Flair in the coming weeks. I mean, there isn't. Well, I say there's hardly any time between now and WrestleMania. So we'll see. We'll have to wait and see. I would hate to see Charlotte Flair, something bad happen in terms of her WWE career because of this or because of Andrade, and I really don't think that was. I really don't think that was anything, Andrade's intention or anything like that. So we'll have to wait and see. What I did want to talk about as well, when it comes to Andrade's interview with Hugo Savinovich of Lucha Libre Online last night, During the interview, Andrade said his inability to master the English language was an excuse for WWE to not utilize him on television. Now, and this was according to sources who translated the interview, Andrade pointed out to Brock Lesnar and Asuka not being fluent in English. He said, quote, "Those are excuses. I know the language better than Brock Lesnar and Asuka. I respect them, but it's the truth. They don't get butts or criticized for speaking English." Now, Andrade has since taken to Twitter to clarify his comments. He said, quote, "I did not say I mastered the language better than Brock. I said Brock speaks it perfect, but he has no need to do so. And that Asuka is a great champion and a great fighter and does not need to speak." The Twitter handle of Lucha Libre Online has asked Lucha Notias to correct their mistake. So I think with that one, again, this goes back to my comments at the start of the video that, yes, this is sometimes part of the problem when obviously having an interview that is translated, because again, things do get lost in translation, context obviously, but sometimes even words themselves. But most importantly, the way that they're said. You know, the way that they're said or the phrasing, sometimes, as I mentioned, doesn't even perfectly translate into English, or a way of talking or a way of addressing something, phrases, you name it, that can be completely different from one language to another. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt, or a pinch of salt, whatever the phrase is, when having interviews translated from one language to the other, because stuff like this happens. And ultimately, the translations came out very quickly last night, and people have had a field day with them. And I really, you know, Andrade, you know, I don't know the guy personally, but from any interview I've ever seen and his reputation in WWE and the professional wrestling business, he's not one to throw stones at people like Brock Lesnar and Asuka or anything like that. And I think, frankly, you know, an indication that there was something wrong with that translation, probably a red flag should have been when he said that, "Oh, I speak English better than Brock Lesnar." People would read that and go, "Oh, he's being sarcastic, he's being funny." In reality, you probably have to look at it and go, actually, he probably doesn't mean that. He probably doesn't, you know, say that or anything like that. Why would he disrespect Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar is a close friend of Paul Heyman. Andrade's one of Andrade's biggest advocates in WWE is Paul Heyman. He's one of the people he thanked when he left the company. So I don't think Andrade would want to do anything to upset Paul Heyman or Brock Lesnar or Asuka or anyone like that. So that's the issue with that one. As I mentioned, it's certainly going to be interesting, and it's certainly the Charlotte Flair thing is definitely something I would say to keep an eye on, and Lord knows everyone will be in the coming days, but it certainly is interesting, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it coming soon. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Charlotte Flair addressing the comments by Andrade, or the misinterpretation of Andrade during his interview last night about the pregnancy misdiagnosis and the reason she was pulled from WrestleMania 37. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.